This is a strange one. We've got Dreamcatcher, based on a Stephen King novel of the same name. I don't really know what to think of this one, to be honest, but we'll see if I can decide by the end of this. So, spoiler alert, you know the drill. You've been warned. I will be discussing the film. Alright, so it's a strange premise. There's these 4 friends who are linked psychically somewhat through an experience that they had with a friend from their childhood who was, how to PC it, differently abled. There we go. And they rescued him from like bullies or something, and it turns out that he like gave them psychic powers or something so that they can like communicate with each other in their heads and hear thoughts and stuff. And then there's this weird thing that they can do with their finger. They go ooh, 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 and then it will like point in the direction of something that they're trying to find. Anyway, that's out of the way. There's this backstory of that builds up through the entire movie, but I don't want to get into that. I'm just going to tell you right now, and then we can focus on the main events of the film, because you know me and remembering things in order, so it doesn't happen. So yeah, anyway, these 3 guys, they get together and they do an annual camping trip or something like that out in the woods, where I guess they go hunting, because there's 2 guys hunting in one scene. And it's just to, get the boys together. I mean, I try to do that with my buddies every once in a while. It's not quite to the extent of every year, but it would be, we try. We're all busy. Adulting is hard, damn it. So anyway. Yeah, that being said, they get their stuff together and they start they do like a cheers to their buddy, his name is Douglas, but he had a speech impediment, so he called himself Duddits, and that's what they all call him. So he's Duddits. And they say 2 Duddits, and like at that point in the story, I'm like, oh, did he die, or what happened? I don't understand. But anyway, we find out later what the story there is. So we have trying to remember their names. So we got a guy they refer to as Beaver. I don't remember his full name. Then they got Jonesy and other guy. Oh my god. Henry is like a psychiatrist. He's one of the friends. So we got Henry, we got Beaver, we got Jonesy, and we got Joe? Anyway, there's 4 of them. So, yeah, 2 of them go out hunting and doing their thing, and they're setting up their own things in like separate areas, and the other 2 drive into the nearest town to get supplies, whether it's like food or booze or whatever the boys want to get. Ammo, could be anything. Yeah, and there's like a storm coming, apparently. It all takes place in winter, by the way, and it's in the backwoods of Maine, because it's Stephen King, so of course it's Maine, right? Which is fine. So yeah, they start heading back, and one of the guys who's hunting ends up seeing this other hunter in a bright orange vest stumble out into the way of him about to shoot a deer, and the guy's completely disoriented, and he collapses and he runs out, and it turns out the guy's name's Rick, and I remember the hunter's name, but I don't remember the main characters. But anyway, his name's Rick. And they take him back to the camp. He says, oh man, I've been wandering around for about a day now. I've lost the rest of the people in my party. And they're like, okay. And this one guy's like, okay, you can come back. And he brings him into the cabin and gives him soup. And the guy's belching and farting and stuff. Apparently it's because he ate some berries that didn't agree with his stomach or something like that. So whatever. Then his other buddy, who is also hunting but in a separate area, comes back to the cabin and sees this guy, and they introduce himself, and he's not doing too good, this Rick guy. So after the soup, they help him to the bed to go lie down, and he's asleep instantly before they can even finish saying, just take some rest and we'll deal with this. So that's that. He's passed out. They immediately rush and open the windows because there was a lot of flatulation going on. So yeah, I'm sure that would smell amazing. What else? Okay, yeah. So then back on the road. I think it's Henry and I don't remember who. Anyway, Henry and another buddy are driving back, and they see another hunter kneeled in the middle of the road. And it turns out that this person is from Rick's party, and all they can get her to say is, "I need to find Rick." So as they're driving and they see her, they veer off the road so they don't hit her, and they end up flipping the truck, so the truck is totaled. That's great. They build a fire. One of them stays with her, and one of them goes back to the cabin on foot. Henry goes back to the cabin on foot to get a snowmobile so he can come back and get both of them and head back or whatever. So that's the plan. Anyway, while this is happening, Pete, that's his name. Okay, so Pete is... Yeah, he goes back to the flip truck and comes back, brings a bunch of beer and sits it down, and this woman is like out cold. Like, my first impression would be like, oh god, is she dead? But he's drunk at this point because he's been drinking like on the drive even before they crashed, so I guess he didn't put two and two together. Back at the cabin, they see a bunch of animals running in one direction past the cabin, but it's like everything. So like you got birds flying, you got deer, raccoons, porcupines, beavers, whatever, bears, like every kind of animal you could think of are running past in one direction. They're like, okay, I don't like that. What are they running from? Which is a very good question. And then shortly over, they see a helicopter fly over. And the helicopter is from a military unit, referred to in this film as Blue Group, I think it is. And Morgan Freeman, who's this colonel, is in there. And there's a lieutenant with him who over the loudspeaker says basically, the area is quarantined, stay put. It'll be about 24 to 48 hours before we can come deal with your stuff. And they're trying to flag him down. Like, we got a sick guy here, Rick. Like, he's in rough shape. Can you take him? And they're like, they don't care. They fly off. And so they go, to the helicopter, whatever. They go back into the house, and then they notice a trail of blood leaving from the bedroom to the bathroom. They're like, oh shit. And they look in the bedroom, and Rick's gone, and the door of the bathroom's shut. And they're like, Rick, you okay, bud? He's like, yeah, we're good. And they're like, we need to make sure you're good. He's like, no, I'm good. And they're like, where are you bleeding from? He's like, bleeding? I'm not bleeding. Anyway, they break down the door. Rick is dead, like completely dead. There's blood all over the bathroom. And then he falls off the toilet. Something slimes out of him goes into the toilet, or it's in the toilet or whatever. And they quickly slam the lid down, and Beaver sits on it, and he's like, go get we have like electrician's tape or duct tape or something in the shed. Go get it, and we'll tape the toilet shut. He tries to flush it first, and it doesn't go down. And it's like banging on it, and he's like jumping like this because it's hitting the seat and all that. So Jonesy, it's Jonesy and Beaver. So Beaver sits on the toilet, and Jonesy goes to the shed to go find this tape, and he's looking for it and everything. And I guess Beaver has like this weird tick where he needs like a toothpick when he's nervous or something, and he tries to pull them out, but the thing hits the toilet seat and all his toothpicks go flying out, and like all of them are in like blood splotches except for one little one on a tile that's untouched. And it's like, in my mind, I'd be like, he's still not going to touch it off a bathroom floor, but he's got this little nervous thing that he needs it, and he's trying to get it, which eventually results in him lifting his butt off the toilet enough for the thing to hit the seat, and it knocks him forward. Excuse me. Sorry, I need a little bit of this Canada Dry for my dry throat. Anyway, so it gets out, and it's like a weird, like, it looks like a lamprey kind of, like, you know how they have that like circular kind of mouth, but it's like that. So on a lot of like things I've read talking about it, people call them like vagina worms. But in all fairness, like, that's kind of how it looks a little bit. But in the movie, they refer to these large worm things as weasels. So I'm going to call them weasels, not vagina worms, because it just sounds a little less intense. So yeah, this weasel basically he like goes like this, like no, and it bites off all his fingers, and he's like, what the? Latches onto his, tries to like kill him basically. Anyway, all this while Jonesy finally comes back in and he sees what's going on. He's like, oh my god, and like yeah, I guess Beaver at this point is like, I'm a goner, this thing's gonna kill me. He's like, shut the door. Oh yeah, part of the creature's design too is on the very part of its tail it has like 3 spiky webbed things. Like a silverfish. If you've ever seen a silverfish, they're I hope you haven't, because I think that means you have an unclean bathroom, but they're like a silverfish. So take all of the legs off of a silverfish and antenna and everything, and then put like a vagina mouth, and that's the worm, and then turn it like purpley red. That's what they look like. That's like the perfect description. Yeah. So that happens. It kills him. He's done. Jonesy tries to keep the bathroom doors shut. Unfortunately for him, the thing gets out, and then he looks behind him, and there's this giant, like, alien-looking thing. It's like, it resembles, like, you know, the gray aliens from, well, I was going to say reality. I don't know if they're real or not, but, like, the most reports in real life, they say that these things look like gray aliens. Well, it kind of looks like that a little bit. It's got the big bulbous head, it's got like really pale skin, no discernible mouth. The eyes aren't quite as big as like what we would think of gray aliens, but it's a cool design nonetheless. We find out later in the film that they don't actually look like that, but they use the image of what we think aliens look like or whatever to like calm us, I guess. I don't really know. It's an interesting concept, though, or maybe gray aliens do exist and they just use that form because they're the most out there kind, and I don't know. Anyway, that's what's going on. Really, they look kind of like the weasels, but giant, and have arms, but we don't see that just yet. So anyway, this thing poofs a bunch of red mist stuff, which we find out later in the movie is called Ripley. They named it after the alien chick or whatever. I think that's what they call it, but like Ellen Ripley from Aliens. Anyway, the red mist is called Ripley for whatever reason, and it infects Jonesy, essentially. It goes through his eyes and nose and everything, and this is how the entity that is known as Mr. Gray infects people. Now, I'm not sure if Mr. Gray is an individual entity, or if it's like a collective, like the Borg or something, where they're all interlinked minds or whatever. But anyway, Mr. Gray is now in, I'd say, about 90% control of Jonesy. So there's this interesting thing they do where they show Jonesy's memories as like a giant library, and they show him like walking around and putting like files and stuff. And there's an incinerator if he wants to forget stuff. It's a neat concept. Anyway, they use that in this to showcase kind of Mr. Gray attempting to take memories and whatnot from this guy's mind. Now, it turns out that they find out that the Duddits kid from the early part of the movie is somehow related to all this going on with Mr. Gray and the alien worm weasels and all that shenanigans. It's a pretty complex story, I'll be honest, so I'm doing my best here to get to remember exactly what's going on. But yeah, and then there's the military section. So Morgan Freeman's colonel guy, he's in charge of this blue force, and he says he's been fighting these aliens for like 20 years and whatnot. Getting too old for this, you know, that old line. I think that even says that at one point. But and then this young lieutenant, well, he's not young, but a younger lieutenant is basically set up to take over. So they have they find the crash site, and they take a bunch of Apache helicopters, and they're all riding them, and all the aliens are using their psychic link to say in like children's voices, like, don't hurt us, there's no infection here, blah 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 blah. And they're in their gray forms, and they're like waving, like, no. So, clever tactic, but it doesn't work. They unleash hellfire in the form of, well, I wonder if they're hellfire missiles. I don't even know. Are hellfire missiles in helicopters? I don't know. Anyway, rocket barrage, missile barrage, whatever, from these Apaches, raining down on them, blasting these aliens to like I would say smithereens, if I may use the term. And and also opening up on them with miniguns and everything. Like, they're just going all out. They're trying to shoot the ship too, but I don't think the ship gets hit. They're just focusing on the aliens, I think, for the most part. But yeah, as they get hit, they like demorph from their like gray alien form into the larger variants of the weasels, but with the arms to like drag themselves and move faster. And they're getting gunned down, like the majority of them. Apparently there's 100 of them ish in that area left that are needing to be exterminated. So this is the plan. They also have a quarantine zone where people are infected with the Ripley mist, and animal corpses are being taken there to be disposed of and everything. So it's like a whole ordeal. It's like an infectious fungus or something, they say, I think. Anyway, long story short, a couple of the aliens make it to the ship, and they like put their tails up and they merge with the ship, and the ship blasts a bunch of that Ripley mist all over the place, takes out a bunch of the choppers. I think like 2 or 3 survive. Obviously the colonels and the lieutenants, maybe another one, I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. Anyway, they go back and they're like, okay, well that wasn't super effective. Anyway, the colonel ends up saying to the lieutenant that they're gonna basically just kill all the people that they have in quarantine. You got to think of the big picture, right? Like, yeah, these people, they go home and they say stuff like they go home and they watch Friends and all that stuff, and the thought of massacring Americans is not a thing that this colonel takes lightly or wants to do, but it's like the necessary evil. So yeah, think of the greater good versus the immediate good, and that's what's pushing his decision to do so. I don't think Lieutenant really likes that idea, but it is what it is. At this point, they also have Henry. I don't remember if I said that or not, but he's in the quarantine area, even though he's not infected, or he's on the other side of a fence or something, I don't really know. And he has a moment with the lieutenant, who basically is planning on calling the general, like going above the colonel's head and saying, like, we can't do this, whatever. And so he uses his mind reading to like talk to the colonel and like brings up his dad and all that stuff, and like, okay, so the colonel's like, all right, there's something up with you, I'm gonna like, let's work together, bud. And they do. Eventually they like, he takes them in a car or something, and they drive off and whatnot. All this time what was so they find Pete, who is taking a pee. He's the one watching the woman by the fire, by the way, if you remember from way back. So he's taking a pee, and a little worm thing comes out of the snow and tries to bite his ween, and he fights it off by like throwing himself on a fire. So he basically humps the campfire to like get this worm off, and it works. I mean, it like bites his face too and stuff, but I mean, eventually he gets it. Good for him. And Jonesy is coming, but like, due to the psychic link, he can kind of tell there's something not right with him, but he's just like, I guess he goes with it. I don't know. There's a scene too earlier where Henry is on the trail and he senses Jonesy, but then he senses not Jonesy, so he quickly hides as he goes past on the skidoo. But anyway, so that like psychic link helps them, I guess, figure stuff out a little bit and whatnot, and realize that there's something wrong with Jonesy. Very wrong. Okay, so yes. So eventually, let's just cut to the chase. Jonesy like wormifies himself and eats eats Pete. So Pete's done. He ends up getting a flat later too, and he picks up this truck with like a driver and kills the driver, and like worm impregnates his dog. Like, he doesn't like, you know, impregnate it, but like the worm things go in it. It's pleasant either way, I guess. So the dog is basically with the worm growing inside of it. A little bit like Aliens, actually, like that. Maybe that's why they called the stuff Ripley, because it's kind of like they gestate inside of a host or whatever. So I get it. Anyway, yeah, so that happens, and then he blows a flat tire or whatever, and takes a cop car. You don't see what happens to the cop, but clearly he killed the cop and whatever. And he's driving to the reservoir. So apparently his plan is, let's get one of these little wormy guys into the reservoir to infect all of like the Boston area. So, and through that, like eventually, like it'll filter into like lakes and stuff and whatever, and it could be a global thing. I guess I don't know much about like reservoirs in Boston and stuff, but I guess Boston's a key one. So that's the plan. Meanwhile, the lieutenant and Henry are going to Maine, to Derry, because, you know, again, Stephen King, right? And they go there to pick up Duddits, who they haven't seen in a long time, find out he's having leukemia, but he like is so pumped to go that the mom just like lets him go. And it's like, if he dies, you know, with you guys, he dies happy. I guess he's like literally on his last legs or something. I don't really know. That seemed a little bit unrealistic, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Yeah, and then they head on the road, the three of them, to the reservoir, because Duddits uses his more advanced psychicness to pick up where Jonesy and Mr. Gray are. And apparently they learn that like Mr. Gray is afraid of Duddits for whatever reason. Whatever. So he gets... Jonesy and the dog get to the reservoir, and he breaks in, and he's trying to get this like massive manhole off with his bare hands, and he can't. I don't know why he doesn't just wormify and do it, because the worms are huge. Like, they'd probably be strong enough, but whatever. He doesn't. He's human. And then, yeah, there's a scene playing out in Jonesy's mind about the library and all that, and he's trying to get all these files of Duddits into the fire, but he learns about them, but he doesn't learn... He doesn't have information about himself, because apparently Duddits was smart enough not to tell any of the guys about Mr. Gray in detail for whatever reason. Yeah. So also the whole time, or as Henry and the lieutenant pull up to the reservoir, that's when the colonel flies in a helicopter that he hijacked from the military before they took over, or as they were taking over the operation, and he's like shooting at the lieutenant. I mean, at that, I don't know. I don't really get it. The motivation there, like, maybe he just doesn't feel that the army can handle it or something. I don't know. But anyway, he's shooting at the lieutenant. Fires up the car that they were in too, and so Henry and Duddits have to jump out, and ends up clipping the lieutenant in the leg. But before he bleeds out, he ends up shooting the helicopter's tail rotor and crashes. Boom, colonel's dead. Lieutenant dies. And Henry's like, okay, Duddits, wait out here. It's safer. I'm gonna go deal with this shit. And he takes the machine gun from the lieutenant, and he's ready to go. On the rooftop, shouted out. No. But yeah, he enters the thing, and this guy is like partially pried the manhole off, and the dog is basically ready to hatch, to put it nicely. And the little wormy guy comes out of the dog, and Henry tries to shoot it, and this stupid weasel worm bites the end of the gun. So obviously, boom, dead worm. That's fun. And then, yeah, he's trying to see if it's Jonesy or if it's Mr. Gray, and like Mr. Gray has some of the details. He's like, tell me something that only we would know, and he tells him, he's like, that's not quite good enough. And that's when Duddits walks in and calls out Mr. Gray, basically, who leaves Jonesy and shows his true form, which is like an even bigger version of the bigger weasel things with arms and the mouth. Anyway, the lamprey mouth. But I mean, it's like a dying guy with leukemia versus a giant monster, so it goes about as well as you would expect that to. Except, what a twist! Turns out that Duddits is another alien. Same species, I guess. And he has the tail thing and stabs the other alien in the tail after being impaled himself, and it forms like a placental cocoon around them of red stuff, and then they both explode and they're both dead. And it's like, Okay, crazy. And this whole time, a little green egg has rolled out of the exploded wormy weasel guy that got shot. And it hatches, and this tiny little wormy guy is slowly going towards the manhole cover. And just as it gets to the edge, Jonesy squashes it. That's the end of that. All's well that ends well. That's essentially the movie. I mean, it ends basically there. They show some flashbacks over the credits of like them hanging out and stuff and being friends, all of them and whatever. So the only surviving members are Jonesy, who is now like not infected, and Henry. That was actually more coherent than I thought it would be. Still not great, but you know, we don't go for quality here. So what am I going to rate this? This is a very weird movie. I remember the first time I saw it, I didn't know what to think of it either. And I still don't really, but I have to think of something, right? So, man. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't, like, good. Maybe, like, low sixes? I feel that's kind of mean, though, because it is neat. It's a bit longer than it needed to be. I'll give it a... I don't remember what I rated a bunch of other movies, so I might rate it higher than it should be, but I'm going to give it a 6.41. 6.42, that's what we'll give it. That's my rating. Should you watch it? Sure. I mean, it's a kind of unique concept. It's a Stephen King movie. The budget was pretty good, so like everything looked okay. Smarter people will probably understand it or like it or whatever more than I do. So, I mean, if you're smarter than me, which you very well might be, yeah, check it out. You might enjoy it more than I did. But that's about all I got to say about Dreamcatcher. Yeah, very strange movie. Oh, why is it called Dreamcatcher? Because apparently when they were kids, they had art class and they all made Dreamcatchers and gave them to Duddits, and he put his in the middle and all the others around them. And then later, when they got their powers, basically Duddits was in the middle and all of them were around. So they were like the Dreamcatcher, and that was, I guess, why it was called that. So that's how it got its name. Well, bye.